Imagine this, you're a soldier, huddled in a muddy trench in Flanders fields. It's late April 1915. The First World War has been raging for months, a grim stalemate of trenches, mud, and machine guns. You're part of the Allied forces defending a critical bulge in the front line, a salient around the ancient Belgian city of Ypres. Holding this ground is vital. Losing it would give the German army a direct route to the strategic Channel ports. The tension is constant, the air thick with the smell of earth and gunpowder. Then one afternoon, something changes. You see a strange, greenish-yellow cloud drifting towards you from the German lines, carried on a gentle breeze. It looks like a low-lying fog, but it moves with an unnatural purpose. You've never seen anything like it. This wasn't just another battle. This was the day warfare changed forever. This is the story of the Second Battle of Ypres. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the pivotal moments of history. Today, we're exploring one of World War I's most infamous and transformative battles. To understand its significance, we need to rewind a bit. By early 1915, the Western Front was a meat grinder. The initial German advance had been halted, and both sides had dug in, creating a vast network of trenches stretching from the Swiss border to the North Sea. The war of movement was over. The war of attrition had begun. Commanders on both sides were desperate for a breakthrough, something to shatter the deadlock. The German High Command, under Erich von Falkenhayn, saw the Ypres salient as a prime target. Squeezing this Allied position could inflict a major defeat and maybe even knock the British out of the war. But they weren't just planning a conventional attack. They had a new, terrifying weapon up their sleeve, one they hoped would be the key to victory: poison gas. The weapon was chlorine gas, a byproduct of the German dye industry. Its development for military use was spearheaded by Fritz Haber, a brilliant chemist who would later win a Nobel Prize. The plan was simple, yet diabolical. On a day with favorable winds, they would release thousands of cylinders of chlorine gas, letting the breeze carry the dense, heavier-than-air cloud over the Allied trenches. The gas was a respiratory irritant. It would attack the eyes, throat, and lungs, causing suffocation and a horrifying death. The Germans believed the psychological shock and physical devastation would be so overwhelming that the Allied line would simply collapse, allowing their infantry to walk through the gap. The target for this first large-scale gas attack was a section of the line held by French troops, specifically the 45th Algerian and 87th Territorial Divisions. Next to them, holding the northern shoulder of the salient, were the newly arrived troops of the 1st Canadian Division. On the afternoon of April 22, 1915, the conditions were perfect. At around 5 p.m., German artillery began a short, intense bombardment of the Allied lines. Then it stopped. In the eerie silence that followed, French and Algerian soldiers watched as the strange greenish cloud rolled towards them. Confusion quickly turned to terror. As the chlorine gas hit their trenches, men began coughing, choking, and clawing at their throats, their lungs filling with fluid. Blinded and in agony, they scrambled out of their trenches and fled, creating a massive 4-mile gap in the Allied front line. The German plan had worked, perhaps even better than they had anticipated. The road to Ypres, and potentially the Channel ports, was wide open. A catastrophic defeat for the Allies seemed imminent. But the Germans hesitated. They were so surprised by the gas's effectiveness that they hadn't committed enough reserves to exploit the breakthrough fully. They advanced cautiously, expecting heavy resistance that simply wasn't there. This crucial hesitation gave the Allies a sliver of a chance. Into this breach, into this scene of chaos and horror, stepped the 1st Canadian Division. These were mostly volunteer soldiers, men who had been civilians just months before. They were now faced with a situation that would have tested the most hardened veterans. Their left flank was completely exposed. German soldiers were pouring through the gap, and a terrifying new weapon was in the air. Their French allies were in full retreat, and night was falling. The situation was desperate. What the Canadians did next has become a legend of military history. Instead of retreating, they counterattacked. Through the night of April 22nd and into April 23rd, the 10th and 16th Battalions charged into the German-held positions at Kitchener's Wood. It was a brutal, chaotic assault across open ground, often devolving into vicious hand-to-hand fighting with bayonets and rifle butts. They suffered over 50% casualties, but succeeded in pushing the Germans back and partially sealing the breach. They bought precious time. As they fought, the Canadians had to improvise against the gas. There were no gas masks. They were told that the chlorine gas could be neutralized by ammonia. So, soldiers began urinating on handkerchiefs, cloths, or even their socks, and pressing the makeshift masks to their faces. It was a grim, desperate measure, but it offered a small degree of protection and allowed them to hold their ground. The German response was to unleash the gas again, this time directly on the Canadian lines. On the morning of April 24th, the greenish-yellow cloud rolled over the trenches around St. Julien. The Canadians endured hours of shelling and gas attacks. The fighting was relentless. Men were blinded, their lungs burned, but they refused to break. Brigade after brigade was thrown into the fray to plug gaps and hold the line. Outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a weapon they didn't understand, they held on through sheer grit and determination. They defended every trench, every crater, every ruined farmhouse. They knew that if they broke, the entire Ypres salient would collapse. During these critical days, the Canadian lines bent, but they never broke. Their stubborn defense prevented a German breakthrough and allowed British and French reinforcements time to arrive and stabilize the front. The cost was immense. In those first 48 hours of the battle, the 1st Canadian Division suffered approximately 6,000 casualties, a third of its strength. It was a staggering loss for a nation that was just beginning to feel the true toll of the war. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a Canadian medical officer, was so moved by the death of his friend and the sight of poppies blooming amidst the graves that he penned the poem In Flanders Fields. This poem would become one of the most enduring symbols of remembrance for the war, forever linking the Canadian sacrifice at Ypres with the image of the poppy. The Second Battle of Ypres would rage on until late May, with more attacks and counterattacks, but the initial crisis had been averted, thanks in large part to the Canadians. The battle's impact was profound. First, it ushered in a new and horrifying era of chemical warfare. After Ypres, both sides rushed to develop their own poison gases and protective equipment. Gas masks became standard issue, and the battlefield became an even more alien and terrifying landscape. Phosgene and mustard gas, even more deadly than chlorine, would soon be introduced, adding another layer of misery to life in the trenches. Second, the battle forged a national identity for Canada. The stand at Ypres was seen as Canada's baptism by fire. These colonial troops, often viewed as inferior by their European counterparts, had proven they were second to none. Their courage and resilience earned them a reputation as formidable storm troops, a reputation they would uphold in later battles at the Somme, Vimy Ridge, and Passchendaele. The battle marked a crucial step in Canada's journey from a British dominion to an independent nation on the world stage. So the Second Battle of Ypres was more than just another bloody engagement on the Western Front. It was a turning point. It demonstrated the horrifying potential of industrial warfare and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The soldiers who choked on gas-soaked rags to hold the line against an overwhelming force showed a kind of bravery that is hard to comprehend. They prevented a strategic disaster and, in doing so, carved out a place in history for themselves and their country. The story of Ypres is a stark reminder of the horrors of war, but also a powerful testament to the courage of those who faced them. It's a story of terror, sacrifice, and the birth of a nation's fighting spirit in the poisoned fields of Flanders. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Second Battle of Ypres. The stories from this era are so important to remember. If you found this video insightful, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of pivotal historical events. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.